This is the unbelievably shocking true story of a haunting small-town crime.
Leave us alone. If you come here again, I'm going to do something about it.
A young mother shot in the head as she's clutching her baby is unfathomable.
The record is finally set straight on the notorious Facebook murders.
It's like a perfect storm of strangeness.
From the haunted heartland in Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this special episode of the Necronomicast. 10 years ago, in 2012, the peaceful small town of Mountain City, Tennessee was the setting for a bizarre and cold-blooded double murder that, to this day, still baffles the community and those that study true crime stories. Janelle Potter, through the tangled web of Facebook and social media, conned and deceived her father Marvin, her mother Barbara, and her boyfriend Jamie into murdering the focus of her jealousy and rage, a newly engaged couple, Bill Payne and Billie Jean Hayworth. Tonight, I welcome Janelle's estranged sister, Christy Duncan, as well as the sister of the victim, Tracy Greenwell, as they come forward to give further insight into what led up to this tragic story of lies, rumors, and manipulation to what has been referred to as the Facebook murders. Calling in on the Necronomicast hotline. Today I have Christy Duncan. She's the sister of Janelle Potter, daughter of Marvin and Barbara, with this incredible story, this mystery that involves a supposed CIA involvement of an officer, cyberbullying on steroids, and a seemingly small, peaceful Tennessee town. Christy, thank you so much for helping me and my listeners understand everything that led up to this story and these cold-blooded murders. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Christy, growing up with Janelle as your sister, I wonder if you can just kind of take me back just a little bit and start with your childhood. Could you describe growing up with your parents and your sister, the dynamic of the household?
So my sister is 6 years younger than I am. She was born in 81. For the most part, it was a normal childhood, at least I thought, until I got into my later teens. But we had happy times. I had a good dad. And my mom basically went back to college and went back to work. So my dad was a stay-at-home dad. He was a good dad. But I will say that over the years, I started noticing a difference in treatment. My sister started developing certain learning disabilities, started having hearing problems, which only created more of an excuse for her not to be able to do something. And then as she got older, she developed diabetes, and it just snowballed from there. It was a form of attention in a lot of ways.
Sure. So growing up with her as little kids, can you kind of help me with your relationship with her? I take it that you guys were not always close growing up when you were younger.
We never were. There was such a big age gap, I guess. But I say that now, and as I say that, I think one of my best friends is actually the same age. So, it was more of, we didn't have anything in common. And, I remember even before I was 10 or 11 years old, my mother telling me I needed to be her role model. And I always remember saying, but I didn't choose that. You're telling me. My mother made me have a job. And I was that introverted kid that enjoyed spending time alone. I didn't need a bunch of friends around. I didn't need to be around people all the time. So I was considered antisocial. But honestly, Janelle is the social butterfly, and she wanted the attention, whereas I didn't want attention. And I was happy taking a walk all by myself if I needed to. But she was the attention getter.
So there you are, comfortable in your own company, kind of an introvert, and she's more of a social butterfly, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Even with these, she had like an auditory disability. What's the nature of that?
So she had lost some of her hearing. I guess she was born. I don't know. There's been so many stories told. So I don't know if she was born with hearing loss or she developed hearing loss. But at some point she had to go through, she couldn't talk well. And they always said it was hearing loss. I really don't know when and what happened with that. And then there was the diabetes, which apparently made it worse. And then the auditory processing issues, which were learning disabilities, that she had a hard time reading and writing and doing math. She couldn't process it. They considered her educationally retarded. However, that's what my mother said. Whether there was ever a formal diagnosis of that, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But that's what was pinned to her, which then became her identity with my family.
And how old is she now?
Oh gosh, you're asking me. She's 40. I'm 46.
But even going back 40 years ago, diagnosis of these kinds of these problems aren't what they are now. So
yeah.
Okay, very good. I understand that. So tell me about what's it like in the Potter household? Like when you're growing up, I know you have all these great home videos of you guys doing things together, like carving pumpkins at Halloween, walks together, family things. And so you have these home videos, but what's it like in the household with you guys growing up?
I mean, I'd say up until the age of about 12, I would say it was pretty happy for them. I was a happy kid. I don't have any complaints. I had good parents, I thought. My mother and I never really saw eye to eye, but it got worse as I became a teenager. And, but my dad, like I said, he was a stay-at-home dad. And, my dad and I spent a lot of time alone together playing rummy for 3 and 4 hours in the summer at the table. He taught me how to play cards. So I had a lot of good times, but I'd say probably in my teens, about 89, when my grandfather died and it really split the family up, is when it really started affecting our family. Every summer, we all did go up to Port Allegheny, which was where my grandmother and grandfather owned a hunting camp. And that was the best memories I have of my childhood, because it involved us all going somewhere. There was no TV. We had running water, but you couldn't drink it. So you had to go get the water out of the spring, so it was a very rustic, and it was actually some of the best times in my life because we were outside learning how to shoot, which I used to save my allowance up to learn how to shoot. Mm-hmm. And I'd do that. So we had a lot of happy times. But like I say, after about 12, 13 years old of my life is when things started going downhill, and being able to pinpoint that, it was just a number of things, probably a lot of it, me growing up to become an individual, as a teenager. But Janelle, as she got older, learned how to play my parents very well. And she learned at a young age, and she continued, and she learned it. She learned it honestly, because my mother is very similar.
Is that right? Your mom's a lot like Janelle, do you think?
Oh yeah. Janelle is made. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. The child learns from the same-sex parent, usually. That's the biggest influence in their life. And that was quite evident. And I think if you look at what happened with these murders, it was also quite evident how much of a part that was played.
Now, earlier you said that you like to shoot. What role does shooting and guns have in your family growing up?
We did a lot of target shooting, and it was a sport for us. Of course, I came from, my entire family, both sides actually, were hunters. I grew up in a very Southern family, and they hunted for their own food. And I grew up with that all my life. And many of the men in my family were gun collectors. And, as far as what it did, I mean, I can remember, there's a picture of me at 3 years old, I think, with my dad standing behind me, or my grandfather. I can't remember which one. And I was shooting a gun. They were teaching us, and we learned from a very young age, you don't touch a gun unless dad or pop-up are there. And if you do, this is the rules. And, you never show your friends, everything is locked up. I mean, we were taught proper gun safety. And like I said, I remember saving my allowance in my late, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, just so I could buy ammunition to target shoot with in the summer when we went to our hunting camp. So it was a sport for us, and it still is in my family. So that's just the way we saw it. Plus, you had a lot of military in our family too.
Now, I saw in some news reports and doing my investigation of this case and the incident and everything, you guys had a lot, or they had a
Mhm.
lot of guns all over the
Mhm.
house.
Small arsenry.
like dozens and dozens and
Yeah.
just out. I mean, I just wonder, and maybe maybe you're not the right one to ask about this, but I mean, did they have to test every single gun, and how long did that take to figure out what gun might have been used? I mean, there was a lot.
Well, you have guns that are pistols,
Mhm.
rifles, shotguns. My father had a lot of military stuff. They're not going to test they're going to test whatever the bullet is. And the bullet, say it was a 38 or a
Sure.
44. They're only going to test what is, could logistically shoot that. They're going to take everything. They're going to confiscate all of it, which they did. But they never did find the gun that shot the bullets. So who knows, but to this day, for a while there, I felt guilty thinking, I have guns in my house. My husband and I go target shooting on date night. The local range has date night, and I still do it to this day because the gun isn't the problem. It's the person behind the gun.
Sure.
So that's the way I still see it to this day.
I see. So you think things kind of changed when the patriarch figure, your grandpa, passed away? He was kind of like a glue that maybe held the family together in some ways, kind of a balance.
He was, like I said, my grandparents lived on the same property with us. My mother's brother married my dad's sister. So it was a very close,
Mhm.
family. My cousins, I had one that was 3 months older than me. The other was a year and a half older than me. We were all very, very close. And when my grandfather died, there was a split in the family, and my aunt and uncle wouldn't have anything to do with us. So I lost out on my cousins. I lost out on my aunt and uncle, and there became this constant infighting in the family. So we never had extended family on that side. So it was just the Potter household.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about how you and your mom didn't always see eye to eye up until the murders. How would you describe your relationship with your mom? I know you moved out at a hostel.
Yes. I love my mother because she's my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there will always be, I'm her daughter, and there's always that bond. But I can truly say, I don't think my mother's ever truly liked me. And, up until the murders. So I moved to Tennessee in October 2010. No, sorry, October 2009. I was going through a divorce. My grandmother was given 3 to 6 months to live, asked me to come down. I said, why not? I've got nothing holding me here. And, 3 years later, she's running circles around me still, and I'm still there. That was, the only time I had any contact. They would come to my grandmother's house. They lived 5 miles away, and I would disappear because Janelle was always with them. And there was always something that got started. The most little thing, such as using the wrong bathroom, and I apparently would look at her the wrong way. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So I stayed away. I had almost zero contact with my parents when I lived there. Even the whole time, even after this, I didn't talk to my parents. I haven't talked to them until about 1.5 years ago was the first time I spoke to them.
Is that right?
Yeah. Since the night of my mother's arrest, that was the first time I spoke to my mother, actually spoke to her. And then after that, up until about 1.5 years ago, I hadn't spoken to her.
So that's your relationship with your mom. Now, with your father, you said that he taught you how to play cards. You guys had maybe a closer relationship than you and your mom?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I say, growing up, I had a good dad growing up.
Yeah.
My dad was good. He was a very caring individual, but he was very protective of his family, his kids. And, it's hard to look back on that now because I have my moments of anger with him right now. But, up until I'd say 2009, I had tried to rekindle a relationship with the family. And that fell apart because my sister accused my father and I of talking about her, which started a big fight, which never happened. But they had come to Pennsylvania for a weekend to stay with me, and Janelle started trouble, and I threw him out of my house. I said, you take her and you get her out of my house. She's not going to come into my home and lie about me and cause problems. This is my home. That was probably the first time I ever truly stood up for myself to them with her. And I don't know, I don't even know, it was 2004 or 5, around there. And that was probably the last time I actually had a relationship, any type of relationship, because they were so mad over that. And there was always, Dad and Christy are doing this. Dad's talking about this. So my father, and I can't say I blame him, he just stopped talking to me because it was easier for him not to deal with the backlash. Because I remember living in that home and being on pins and needles my entire teenage years, always about what my mother was going to say to me or do. And it wasn't a physically abusive home ever. We never had that problem, but the mental abuse, the emotional abuse, physical probably would have been easier to heal from.
It just sounds like just walking on eggshells, the anxiety all the time of the drama induced by your sister, and how you and your parents all, had to deal with it, and you all had your own separate ways of either ignoring it, like you said, like your dad just kind of was easier to not deal with it than to deal with it. And then the anxiety of walking on eggshells, who's going to incur somebody's wrath, or it just seems like so much drama.
It was. I lived in a household full of drama when it came to Janelle and my mother. And like I say, my father, he just kind of followed along. I mean, just like with the murders, he was convinced of a lot of things, and what husband doesn't want to believe their wife? What husband doesn't want to believe their children, or what father? And, I don't necessarily blame him for that, but I think back and it's just like, how could you not have seen? Like how? And I remember the one time my father ever spoke against my mother, it was right before I moved out in 1999, 2000. I had come home and I said, I'm going to be moving out. They were getting $400 or $500 a month from me for rent for a bedroom and a bathroom. And I told him that, I don't remember the conversation, but I know that it was along the lines of my mother and her manipulation and just how she treated me. And he looked at me and said, "It's a learned behavior, Christy." That was the first time I ever heard my father acknowledge that there was something not right, because he felt my grandmother was that way, oddly enough. And she was in a lot of, but it didn't affect me, put it that way. So, for me to stand up when I did, and then I finally just had enough, and they were always kept at, arm's distance, because every single time I've ever let them in, I've gotten hurt.
Sure. One of the things I was going to ask you was the relationship your mom and dad had with each other. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, that it took a long time for your dad to admit to you, or to bring up out loud, to verbalize it, some of the anxiety that was happening. Did you notice any things between your parents? You said your dad was very supportive.
He was. My dad was a very supportive man. Even with my mother, as a husband should be. They love each other. To this day, my father is infatuated with my mother. They were high school sweethearts. They met at 14 and 15 years old. And to this day, I don't understand it. I will never understand it. But to this day, that's the love of his life. And they always loved each other. But I can tell you, for instance, we were in Olean, New York, and I was 17, I think. And my dad and I were standing out on the street, and my mother and I think my grandmother and whoever else were inside shopping in one of the stores. And there was a young lady that came out, and she was flirting with my dad. And I was standing right there, and he just and I said, "Dad, look at that." I thought it was cool, 17 years old. I'm like, yes, that's kind of cool. Dad's being flirted with. And he looked at me, he said, "No other woman would ever want me." He said, "I don't have to worry about that." And I just, and I just remember that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're a good looking man. Because of his disability from where he had hurt his back, he broke his back 2 weeks after I was born, and he did have a lifetime of medical problems. But I just remember that has stuck with me all these years. Like, he just thought he was not worthy of anything. And I remember this woman was really beautiful. And I'm like, what? Okay. But that just kind of took the sale out there, but I just thought it was cool. And so that kind of made me think over the years. And then I watched, as the years went on, the manipulation between my mother and my sister to him, because he couldn't so much as say boo to me at times before he's being accused of taking my side on something that never happened. So, he and I just kind of faded out after years. The love has always been there, and it still is there. Mm-hmm. But and rightly so, I find myself getting more angry these days about everything.
So mom kind of controlled the house a little bit?
We always laughed and would say, she was the punishment setter. He was the enforcer because, he would have that deep voice. He had that dad voice and nobody ever fooled with him, but it was always, mom would set the punishment. Dad was the enforcer, but again, like I said, there was never any physical violence in our home. It was just a lot of mental and emotional stress. I grew up in a very stressful, I remember at 18 years old I worked for a restaurant. And I remember, I guess my mom had come in a few times and one of the other waitresses said, it's going to be a wonder if you get out of that house sane. Other people would see things that were happening. And that's when I was like, why? Am I really in a weird situation? And it took years for me to recognize it.
And you were up and out at 18?
No, I left, I was, 1996. So I was 21.
Oh, okay. So 21, you're out of the house.
For a couple of years, and I did go back. I moved back home. One of the things I've always said to my parents, instead of being so, stressing on how Janelle and I were acting to each other, teach me how to manage money. Because I got out as a typical 21-year-old and thought credit cards, this is great. I ended up in trouble and I had to move back home and it taught a hard lesson. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up moving back out I was home maybe 2 years and I moved out 1999 and that was it.
Those 2 years are when you were out and then you returned. Mm-hmm. What was it like with Janelle later as you were as an adult?
Well, funny enough, I did not return back to my parents' home. They did not want me to come back. So I actually moved in with my grandmother who lived right behind them. Mm-hmm. And within probably 8 months, I remember my mother having me believe that my grandmother was rooting through my things, that she was talking about me, that she didn't approve of, I had a high school sweetheart, the same guy I dated till I was 20 something, that she didn't approve of him, which he was the life. Everybody loved him in our family. I'm sure you saw some of those videos of the prom and whatnot. He was another son in the family. She had me, I fell for it. I believed it. And I moved out of my grandmother's. My mother says, well, you can move in here, but you have to move into the little room, which was about the size of a closet, and it's fine. I mean, it's what they had available. And I lived there a year and I couldn't take that. Janelle always starting trouble. It was, Mom, Christy was talking about this. Dad, Christy said this. And it was and then it would be a confrontation. Like, what are you talking about? And it was nonstop. And it was simple as that stupid little stuff. And it just, enough of that wears up on you to where it just becomes so stressful. You just don't want to be around it anymore.
I just wonder how you can even repair a relationship. I mean, we're not even at the murders or anything like that. We're not even there yet. But I mean, I don't even know how a relationship with the sister or your parents or anything like that can heal ever. So it's amazing that these things happened. As Janelle got older, and I guess a computer at some point was introduced into the home, and then Janelle discovers social media. Mm-hmm. I hear your frustration and your reaction to that. But mm-hmm. What do you know about Janelle's online life?
So I don't know when the computer came around. What I can tell you is when I found out about her life on social media, it was probably, it was when I moved to Tennessee. I was with my grandmother, 2009, 10. I knew she had a MySpace. I mean, who didn't have a MySpace or a Facebook or whatever it was, but I wasn't friends with her. Had no idea what was transpiring behind the scenes. And then at some point, and I want to say it was maybe around the summer of 2010, one of my cousins got a hold of me. It's my paternal cousins. They had all been to a picnic, and apparently the conversation of my sister running her mouth about me came up, and there was a website called Topics that was widely used in the South. And it's nothing but a smut and let me smear your name every way I can kind of website that I saw. I don't know. I just know that's how it was used there. Of course, I didn't know anything about it, and my cousins found it, and I ended up logging on and reading. Now, granted, Janelle never admitted to this, swore she never did it. When you have spent a life listening to her talk and write and see how she acts, it's just like, a reading from your own mother. You know who's writing it. And she would have multiple screen names, and she would just how she would, the anger would come out towards the end. You just take care of your own life while you hang out and slut and you do this and you do that. I mean, she had me giving men blowjobs at the local gas station. Now, this is a person I had not spoken to, and I can't tell you how long. So her hatred for me runs very deep. And to this day, I don't know what that is. I can honestly tell you, I don't hate her. I don't like her, but I don't hate her. And I don't know why her hatred runs so deep of me, but that happened. And that was the start of, I realized that she was on social media. And then, of course, that's the only thing I really knew, other than I knew she was on Facebook, but I did not take time to look at any of her stuff because, you know what? Didn't care.
Sure.
And then, of course, this all led up to that year. And little did we know there was a whole lot more going on behind the scenes.
I remember topics, and I remember what a garbage can it was. And people around here would always talk about, use it as a means to bitch about businesses or you know what I mean? It was not the most pleasant online. I don't even know if it's still around anymore.
I don't know.
It's so strange. From the outside, forgive me, from the outside looking in, it just seems like your parents, for you guys growing up in the same house, even though there was, 6 years of difference between you guys, it just seems like you guys could not have been raised more differently. And I know she had difficulties growing up and everything, but you were left to fend for yourself or to leave. You came back. She was coddled and stayed home up until she went to prison.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I am thankful every day of my life that I am that introvert that didn't need anybody, that it wasn't that I didn't need people. I didn't want anybody. Leave me alone. Let me handle it myself. I was very independent. And I thank God every day that I was that way, because if I wasn't, would I still have been under their thumb? What would have happened to me had I been the least little bit, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, been able to be manipulated. I recognized it at a young age, and I'm thankful for that, because I really wonder, had I not, what would have happened to me?
Sure. Your sister meets an individual, Jamie Curd. How do they meet?
I don't know. I really have no idea. The first time I ever heard about him, so like I said, my mother would come to my grandmother's house, and I only lived with my grandmother for about a year, maybe a year and a half tops. I can't remember. But, like I said, she had been given 3 to 6 months. 3 years later, we're still shopping at 9:00 at night. She's doing fine. So I moved to Abington, which is 45 minutes over the Virginia-Tennessee border. And my mother would come visit my grandmother, and my grandmother would tell me what they talked about. And it's just like the first time I ever heard Billy and Billie Jean's name was 1 week prior to their murders. And I heard it because it was a conversation my mother had with my grandmother, because my grandmother told me. Same thing with Jamie. So what I know I can tell you is early 2010, roughly, and this is actually public record. I got a phone call at 5 something in the morning. I don't know. My grandmother came to my grandmother's house, and my grandmother comes in and opens the door and says, "Here, it's your mother," and throws the phone at me. I'm like, what? It is 5:00 in the morning. What is this? She says, "Christy, I just got a call from the sheriff's department, Mountain City, that they just picked you up walking down the road." I said, "Well, quite obviously it's not me. Did you check your other daughter's room?" She didn't go anywhere. And I said, "You better check." I said, "Because I'm going to pick up my phone line and call them." Well, in the meantime, I'm calling the sheriff's department, and I'm like, "Look, this is who I am. My mother's on the phone. Do you have my sister, Janelle Potter?" "Yes, we have her here." In the meantime, I hear my mother on the phone on the other thing yelling, "Oh my God, Janelle's not here. She's gone. Oh my gosh." And I said, "Go get your daughter." Here she had automatically assumed, and it turned out that she apparently had run out, packed her insulin and everything. Of course, we weren't told the real story, but she had left the house that night, and she and Jamie were going to go get married. Jamie didn't think she'd leave, so he never showed up. And she was walking down Cold Springs Road in the middle of the night, all dirty. She had fallen. And the only reason I got the story was because I was in EMS at the time, and we're all brotherhood, and we talked to each other. And I got the real story. The story that came from my parents was she didn't take her insulin. She got confused and went out and didn't know what she was doing. She and Jamie were trying to meet up that night, and he didn't think she'd show up. So that's the first time I found out about Jamie.
And he worked at the local factory there.
Something that had to do with yarn or something, because my mother used to talk about how he had all this like filament and yarn all over him when he would come to their house. I remember my grandmother talking about it. She said she can't stand this guy. So I don't know if they liked him or they didn't like him. I don't know what the story was, but he sounded pretty special to me. I mean, I don't know. It was weird. And I don't know how they met. And from what I understand, I guess maybe they may have met through Bill because he was Bill's cousin.
Just thinking about this with everybody's age and everything, you know, she just seems so stunted in her development with relationships and with people and everything. Because we're not talking about a 15, 16-year-old girl that, you know, it meets a guy, Jamie Curd, and the parents are watching, making sure no hanky-panky or anything like that's going on. I mean, we're talking about a lady in her late 20s, 30s, early 30s, with a friend that's coming over to visit and a friend of the family, and yet they have some kind of romantic relationship of some sort, even though she's watched pretty much, you know, like a hawk by your folks.
You know, to this day, who knows what really happened? Yeah. You know, what I remember saying is she's 30 years old. Why in the world is she sneaking anywhere? She's 30. But, you know, we are talking about mentally stunted, because I will tell you the one thing she definitely is mentally stunted to that of a child as far as 15, 16-year-old. She's very intelligent, but her emotional intelligence is very stunted.
Sure.
So, you know, she is perfectly capable of doing all this stuff on the computer and things that people, she couldn't be smart. Yes, she is. But when it comes to emotional intelligence with relationships, it is very stunted. It was that of a child. Because even if you read her writings, even on topics, you can see it's that of a child. And the angrier she gets, the worse it gets.
Now, I have 3 kids, teenagers and a 9-year-old. So I know what you mean about the emotional hair fire trigger that that like children can have. So you combine that with, you know, overprotective parents, somewhat manipulative mom. I mean, just in your dad's, just everything.
It was very weird. And I will tell you something else that, you know, and it got worse when they moved to Tennessee. You know, I grew up in a household that was it was neat. We cleaned every Friday. It was a very neat house. I mean, we lived in our house. We had a lot of stuff, you know, they always had a lot of stuff, and they had a lot of collections. My dad was a collector. My mom was a collector. Fine. I remember the very first time I only set foot in their house in Tennessee twice. The first time was I was married. So it was 2007 or 2008. I was trying to get them back into my life once again, and they let me come over. And I remember walking in and just being in awe of the amount of stuff in the house. You know, I remember the furniture was too big for the room. And then I walked into the kitchen and I looked into the dining room, and the dining room table was stacked 2-3 feet high of food, boxed and canned food. The kitchen table was the same way. There was stuff, there wasn't counter space. And I remember walking out there saying, what has happened? Something has happened here. It is not normal. And I remember the basement being stacked high with boxes that they never unpacked. Like it was just stuff upon stuff upon stuff. Something happened. And I think whatever triggered that caused a hoarding issue as well. Because if you even talk to the TBI or Dennis Brooks, and they tell you, you know, they came to my house and to interview me, and it was like night and day. Because I had everything right where it belonged. And I just lived in a clean house. And it was just, they had so much to sift through. So something happened. And it just, I mean, it went with the whole thing of all of them being just not able to handle life, I guess. I don't know.
I'm sure you can go back and look at how things dissolved Like you said, sometimes that there's a physical manifestation of people's lives unraveling when you're looking at their house, just the, like you said, just the unkemptness of it, and just a life in disarray, mentally, everything. That
is exactly what I saw at that first moment. Looking back, I look back now and I'm like, that should have been a red flag to me. Mm-hmm. Something has happened here, but I just chalked it up to, they had just moved 2 years before. I would have been unpacked by then. But, I look back now, and the triggers or the red flags of these things that built up over the years. And I guarantee you that my mother and my sister wouldn't even have a clue what I'm talking about, because they were so far engrossed in it, they couldn't tell.
So what can you tell us about the start of the social media feud and the problems that happened with that?
I don't know a lot about that, only what everyone else knows. I know what my grandmother was telling me. I know at some point, I guess, Billie Jean and her best friend, and I don't remember her name, they had maybe taken Janelle to court for harassment. I remember being angry at that judge for throwing it out, because he could have probably put a stop to some of this. But he threw it out because Janelle was disabled, I guess. I don't really know. Mountain City is a very small town, and everybody knows, if you don't know what you're doing, everybody else does. I'll tell you that. But, they have their own way of doing things, and there, to me, seemed to be a lot of corruption. That's just a personal opinion that I developed over watching how things unraveled. People were not held accountable. One, Janelle, she should have been held accountable. It never happened. So that's when I knew about it starting. And then, of course, the topics thing. And then after that, I didn't know any of this stuff was happening, other than my parents were telling my mother was telling my grandmother that they were fighting over Facebook, and somebody tried to shoot out their window one night, and somebody was following them at the grocery store, and, somebody showed up on their property. Like, I would hear all these stories and assuming that that's where it started, from social media, because from what I understood, she wasn't going out and hanging out with anybody. So that's what I know. And then, of course, the day the murders happened was when I found out, that week is when I found out the extent of everything.
Sure. You find out about the murders. Did you hear about it on the news and you hear about this crazy thing or?
So that was an odd situation. It was, I believe it was a Monday. I had worked and I came home and my grandmother called me, and I had been on my Facebook scrolling. I have a childhood girlfriend that we met in Pennsylvania. She moved down there. We caught back up over the years, and I had seen where she had said prayers for Billy and Billie Jean and their family, such a tragedy. I didn't know who it was, didn't even click. Well, about probably 6:00, my mother's mother called me, and she asked me if I'd heard what happened. I'm like, no, I haven't. I don't watch the news. What are you talking about? I didn't really think much of it. And she said, well, Billy and Billie Jean were murdered this morning. And it was like, I heard those names. I'm like, isn't that who you just told me? She said, yeah. And I remember stopping, and my exact words were, oh my God, Grandma. Oh God. And my grandmother said, yeah. And I said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And she said, yeah. My grandmother and I were, I always call her, she's always part of my soul, because we were that close. And she thought the same thing I do. We knew they were involved. And funny enough, I told my girlfriend that night on the phone, I thought my family was involved in it that very night that it happened. And my husband came home, and I remember telling him, and I said, my God, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. I was falling apart. And then we just kind of let it go, because I didn't know what happened. I was keeping my mouth shut. I wasn't going to start trouble. Mm-hmm. And then oddly enough, when my father was arrested a week later, I was so far removed from my family that he was my fiance at the time, boyfriend, I'm sorry, didn't even know my parents' name. And he called me from his job and said, hey, did you hear they arrested somebody for those murders? I was like, no, who? He said, Marvin Potter. And I'm like, honey, that's my dad. He had no idea he was calling to tell me that. So my husband felt like crap. But
is that how you?
That's how I found out about my father's arrest.
From your boyfriend?
And at the time, he's now my husband. Yeah. And he did not know that was my father because I did not talk about my family. He knew that we were on the outs and I just left it at that. The less he knew, the better it was. At that point, I didn't know if I'd end up with him. And I never said it. So he had no idea he was telling me my father had been arrested.
Did he say the last name?
Yes. He said it was Marvin Potter because he was a respiratory therapist at the local hospital and was standing in a patient's room treating them and watched the news. And I was at work and he called and told me that, having no clue that that's who he was telling me. Yeah, there's a lot of things about this case you couldn't make up.
So did he not, was he just like, well, that's interesting because of the last name?
I did not have Potter as my last name. I still had my married name. I had not gone back to my maiden name on purpose.
I understand now. Okay, that makes total sense. So he is watching it unfold on television like they made this, because Mountain City, how big is Mountain City, Tennessee?
If you blink your eyes, you'll miss it. It's got like 2 red lights or something. It's small. It's, you've got probably a total of 2 miles of town. And then outside of town is nothing but mountains. There's not a lot. I mean, I think you have 2 grocery stores, maybe 3 or 4 little McDonald's and but it's very close-knit community, very family oriented. There's not much to it. I mean, you blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah. So this is not a murder that happens like in Los Angeles or New York or, a large city. This is a very, very small town. So when you said you heard about these murders and you knew in the back of your brain,
I knew. I knew at that moment when my grandmother said that, and my grandmother knew too. We both had that conversation on the phone and I said, oh my God, those are my exact words. And I'll never forget that conversation because I felt like as soon as she said, yeah, I know, she was affirming what I was thinking. And it just, it was odd. And then of course, my husband a week later informs me of who was arrested without knowing who he was telling me about. So he felt great.
Right. How did you feel? And you were at work.
Yes.
How did you feel at that moment when you get that call and you're like, honey, that's my dad?
Well, so he had been arrested at, I think it was 3:00 that morning. I want to say it was about probably 10 or 11. Of course, I'm falling apart. I'm shaking. I'm, a nervous wreck. And I have to go tell my boss at this point that I need to leave. And the reason I'm leaving is because my grandmother's going to have a nervous breakdown if she finds out that all this stuff. I couldn't get her on the phone. My grandmother was, at that point in her life, it didn't take much to make her just a nervous wreck. She'd have to take anxiety medicine because it was so bad. And I just knew, I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. Yeah. And she smoked like a chimney, and that would have even increased at that point. So I knew I had to leave and go there. And I remember calling my cousins in Pennsylvania and telling them, of course, their mother is my dad's sister. I can tell you probably for 2 nights in a row, I paced my house and did not sleep. I was so upset and it was worried about my dad, but I honestly don't know. I was just a mess. I remember wishing that I was one of those people that did have anxiety medicine because all I was doing was pacing the house 3, 4 in the morning. And my mother was texting my cell phone and I wasn't answering her. She was telling me, your dad didn't do this. I don't even remember because I remember deleting them as soon as they came through.
So this bomb detonates in your life and everybody's life. And then later, Janelle and your mom, Barbara, they're arrested. How did that unfold? Where were you? How were you when this happened?
Another one that you just can't plan or make up. So my mother was arrested early on for tampering with evidence, as I'm sure you probably know. Mm-hmm. And I called Scott Lott, I believe, or it might have been Dennis Brooks. I don't remember. One of them, I spoke to them and I said, look, do me a favor. Give me a heads up when this happens because I got to go take care of my grandmother. I was so mad because my grandmother just did not handle this well. She was already on her last legs. And I said, the least you could do, I have cooperated with you. The least you could do is give me a heads up. I will give them this. the week before my mother's arrest, I got a phone call from both Scott Lott and Dennis Brooks giving me a heads up that they were having a grand jury meeting on Friday morning. And this was, I think, Monday. They trusted me with the information. I could have easily gone and said something, but I was like, you know what? I'm just staying the heck out of all this. I just kind of watched it unfold. And it was very surreal at the time. Friday, they meet, they get the true bills on them. I think it was Scott that called me. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, Christy, I was just going to let you know that we got a true bill both on your mother and your sister. I said, okay. I was at work. I was working EMS. And he said, the problem is your sister is in the hospital and she's in Abingdon. My sister always went to the hospital in Johnson City, Tennessee. They lived in Tennessee. That only makes sense. Mm-hmm. I have my theories on how many times she went to the hospital and why, because she had a really good habit of being able to make herself sick. We know this. My mother has never to this day, even now, doesn't believe she could ever do it. But I'm telling you, she was known for hiding candy, taking insulin and not eating. I mean, she put herself into DKA numerous times. Of course, it was never her fault. But I digress on that one. I said, okay, well, I called up to the hospital and I talked to a friend of mine and I said, my sister's in such room. She's in CCU. I'm like, okay. So I called Scott and I told him and I said, she's in CCU. She's not going anywhere. I said, she's got to step down for 2 days prior to being released. So you've got time. She's not going anywhere. He said, yeah, he was trying to figure out if he needed to do extradition, all that. Mm. The day goes on. I start getting a migraine because, of course, I'm stressed out. And I had called a friend to come in early for me. 15 minutes before she was supposed to get there, we get a call. The person coded in our ambulance. It ends up being a 2-hour call. I should have been home an hour and a half before all this came about. But I walk around the corner of the EMS area at the hospital, and there is the TBI, the DA's office, the Johnson County Sheriff's Department, the Abington and Washington County Sheriff's Department. It was, fully loaded. There were 5 ambulances. Mind you, none of these people knew who I was according to, in relation to this case, because I kept it quiet. I never told anybody except our captain. And Scott looks at me and says, what the H are you doing here? And I said, I am working. What do you think I'm doing here? He pulls me out and he said, you need to get out of here. We've got your mother in cuffs and we're bringing her down. He said, you need to get out of here. I said, I will do my best, but I was stuck. And I remember walking in and it was a small, probably 10 by 10 room. One end is a sliding glass doors to the front desk of the ER. The other are the sliding glass doors to go out to the ambulance bay. And I remember walking in and saying to my partner, we need to go. And just as we turned around, they brought my mother down. Somebody had tipped off the media. The media swarmed the door. The officers were at the other door. I was stuck against the wall in this 10 by 10 room with 50 people. And my mother walked past me and said, thanks, Christy. I've never forgotten that. But the other thing I've never forgotten is you could not have planned those series of events that afternoon. We got that patient back, which was the only silver lining of that night. We got him back. But I remember looking at her hands. They were in front of her like this, and they were cuffed. And I just remember that is burned in my brain. They get me out of there. We get in the ambulance. We go to pull down the street, and the sheriff that had her in the car makes a wrong turn, ends up nose to nose with our ambulance. And I have to end up looking at her in the back of a police car all the way out from the hospital. You could not have made this up. And it did not take me 24 hours to realize that, I've always had a strong faith in God. And I realized that was God's way of telling me that I was now in control. I was done. I had control of any contact I ever wanted. Mm-hmm. Because, and I think that image of her hands being cuffed is what did it for me. Realizing that I don't care if she blamed me. At this point, I'm in control now. I spent my life running from them. And here I don't have to run now. That's what came out of that within 24 hours. And then Janelle, of course, was placed under arrest, and they brought a magistrate in to read her rights and all that kind of stuff. And she was, I guess, let out 3 or 4 days later and went straight to jail. But yeah, that's how it happened. So you couldn't make that up.
Man, Christy, I'm telling you. Now, you're talking about you can't make this stuff up. And real life is much, much stranger than fiction, for sure.
It is.
Speaking of making things up, now we've talked about like your reaction to the arrests and growing up and everything. Now we're kind of focusing on the trial and how things are revealed. All these events that have been going on, just everything. Did Janelle, has she ever like impersonated you or tried to implicate you in any way with this situation?
I don't know if she's impersonated me. I do know that I was told that she tried to, and I actually read it on Topics. She did try to say that I was there doing a drug deal and the drug deal went bad and I was involved. I do remember reading that myself, and I just kind of laughed it off. I remember sending a screenshot to probably Scott Lott or Dennis Brooks and just saying, hey, heads up, this is what's going on. And I won't lie to you. The power of someone that lies like it's their job can damage someone's life very quickly. And I started getting afraid of, was I going to be pulled into this? I won't lie to you. It really weighed on me for a long time. And I think that's probably what led me to voluntarily speak with Scott Lott and Dennis Brooks, because I wanted to know what they knew, what are they asking me? And it wasn't long before I figured out that they knew I was not involved. I mean, my whereabouts was easily, I was working, so I was, could verify where I was. But she did. And I don't know how many times that went. And I know that my mother told me, oddly enough, that Tate Davis, he was her co-counsel, that he tried to say that I was involved in this. And oddly enough, his stepdaughter and I worked together. In fact, she was the one that got me out of the hospital the night my mother was arrested. It just intertwines. I was working with the stepdaughter of the co-counsel. I mean, again, here we go, the weird stuff. So that's all I know of that ever happened. I don't know how far it went, because when I tell you that I removed myself as far away from this as I possibly could, I was involved when I was asked to be involved.
Sure. And I was going to ask you about your participation. So with your participation, it's when you were asked about you're brought into the trial. So about the trial, what do you witness? What do you discuss?
Nothing I stated did anything to put any of them in jail. Mm-hmm. What I was brought in to verify were family relationships. Whose writing is this? What kind of dad was he? Do you love your mother, or do you care about her? Whatever it was. And then, of course, Janelle's lawyer tried to really shake me up. And it was a very surreal, because I remember actually laughing out loud. You could hear, you heard it on the microphone, because my sister's lawyer, Cameron, was being so utterly ridiculous. He was like a 5-year-old throwing a temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. And the judge stopped him 3 times and sent the jury out and told him he wasn't going to treat me like that. I remember thinking, this is so utterly ridiculous. I just laughed. It was just a response. And I just remember thinking all of it was so surreal. And then I lost it. At the time, I couldn't see. Before I had LASIK, I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me. And I remember taking my glasses off when I got to the stand, so I couldn't see any of their faces. Mm. I didn't want to look at their faces, because I knew if I did, I'd start crying. It didn't even help, because I ended up losing it anyway. But yeah, it was a very weird situation. So I didn't really have to answer a whole lot other than, and honestly, I don't know that I provided a lot of help with the trial. I don't know if it was more of a, this just adds back up to what we're saying type of thing. Because honestly, they would not have needed me. They subpoenaed me, mm-hmm. but I don't think anything I said really verified much, to be honest with you. So it was kind of an odd situation. I don't know that I provided much help.
And it's a very surreal experience for you. It was the courtroom. Describe like the atmosphere of it. Was it a kind of a circus? Was this held near Mountain City, or was it in the county court? Or
it was in Jonesboro, which is about hour and 20 from Mountain City, I guess.
Did it attract a lot of press from out of town, national?
Oh, yes, you had every press you can imagine. And, you know, it's just like one of the weirdest things that happened to me was during my dad's trial. My husband at the time, I would not let him come with me. I said, you know, I need to do this on my own. Again, here I am being myself. I need to do this alone. You know, I did it. I sat there and Dennis Brooks told me, he said, you're the mystery redhead in the house. Apparently nobody knew that there was another daughter. All you had to do was a simple background check. I mean, it amazes me the lack of just details that were not, it was just weird. And when I got up on the stand with my dad's trial, and I remember looking him in the eye the entire time. He is the one I looked in the eye the entire time. He wouldn't even look at me. Not once he looked at me. And I remember when I had to introduce myself and when I said I was his daughter, all you could hear were the zoomings of the camera in the back. I mean, there were 3 or 4 cameras. You just heard zoom. And it was just like, I mean, I felt like the kid that wants to, you know, sink down in their chair, like, oh, you know, but it was very, very weird. And it was a weird feeling like, and then when I was told nobody knew there was a daughter, I'm like, how does that happen in something this big? How do you, it was weird.
Very weird, very surreal. You just can't believe any of this is happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
But yet it's not, you know, going back earlier to your statement that you said that when you heard about these murders, you kind of knew something was afoot. So you're not completely, totally shocked and surprised that all this is going on.
But it doesn't matter if you're not shocked and surprised. You're still shocked and surprised. Like in your heart, you don't want to believe your family's capable of such a thing, you know? And for a long time, I held out in my heart. I know what my heart believes, but what does my mind tell me? Like I struggled with that for a really long time because the problem with my dad is he wouldn't talk to anybody. He didn't talk to his lawyer. He wouldn't testify on his own behalf. In fact, when the when the prosecution rested, the defense stood up and said, Your Honor, we rest. There was no defense, nothing. He wouldn't talk to his lawyer. There was no physical evidence against him. What convicted him was his phone call to my mother where he told her he was involved. And they played that in the courtroom. And the jury said, they pulled the jury after, and the jury said, that is why we convicted him. Are you going after the women? So there was enough in my dad's trial to convict my mother and sister, I think. I saw enough anyway. But there's no way to describe what it's like to go through that. It is just a constant daily up and down. You know, you see those graphs that do this. That's what it was on a daily basis because you never knew what now is going to pop up.
What is your reaction to the murder conviction when they read that in court? What is your reaction?
I was only there for my father's. I was sitting 2 seats behind him. And I just remember my heart sinking. But it didn't surprise me because his lawyer stood up and said, Your Honor, we rest, and did not present a defense. How could you not convict somebody? We knew it would happen. I think it took him 3 hours or some ridiculous amount of time, 3 hours maybe. How do you react? I know that I still today can remember that feeling of just my heart dropping into my stomach. But yet I knew it was going to happen. For my mother and my sister's trials, I purposely was not there. In fact, I was at my mother's brother's house, my uncle's house, following the Twitter feed. And I remember stating to my uncle sitting beside me as we read it, that I am finally free for the first time in my life.
It wasn't a surprise, but these years of all this anxiety and everything that you've been going through, and anxiety is not even the right word. I mean, just this sheer hell that you went through, and you hear the reaction or you hear the verdict and your reaction is not surprise, but
sadness
that it came to this.
Yeah. And it was sadness. And I kind of want to say relief. It's the only way I can describe it. And maybe that it was just, I thought it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like at least the victims had some justice. I just kind of remember thinking relief as I was walking outside the courthouse. And I don't know what that relief was from, just that it was over. And then I had my mother's to look forward to, or relief that I don't know. I that's so hard to explain. I've never been asked that question.
And now we are removed
Mm-hmm.
from all this for a number of years. And you're very close now, I hear, with the victim, Bill Payne's family.
Beverly.
Mhm.
Yes, I am. You know, Beverly, how do I describe her? You know, rightly so. She has a lot of hatred for my family, and she should.
Mhm.
Beverly, I don't even remember how we ended up in contact. I know that Tracy was part of it, because I reached out to Tracy before the trials, Bill's sister, and said, look, you know, I don't even remember what I wrote. I'm very sorry, whatever it was I said. And she and I struck up what little of a friendship, you know, you could have at the time. And then somehow I ended up friends with Beverly, and she took me in like her own child. I mean, this is a woman that we say I love you to each other once or twice a week. You know, I'm a poodle mom. I have 5 poodles. She got a poodle because she loved mine so much. And I've worked with her on what to do for her poodle. And her other son, Josh, I mean, you know, he tells his fiance that his sister lives up near Norfolk. I mean, you know, it's just, it is still surreal. And I feel like I probably need to keep my distance, but I have no reason to keep my distance, because they've never treated me wrong. And they have accepted me knowing that I had no control over what my family did. Mm-hmm. Because I will tell you, being in the position I'm in, there were a lot of people that judged me. I even saw a comment on a Facebook post, death to red, because of who I was, not knowing I had nothing to do with my family. People were judging me. And of course I'm like, whatever, you know, I never cared, but you know, they didn't have to take me in like a child. And Beverly and Dave and Josh, you know, I will say I'm thankful to have them in my life. From this tragedy came something good, and they're my family.
Sounds like you really put the pieces together the best that you could, mm-hmm. and have really moved on with your life. And that's really, it's great to hear that the strength that you have, and it comes through just talking to you. You know, there's a lot of victims in this. Of course, there's, you know, Bill Payne and Billie Jane Hayworth, your family torn apart, but also their little boy, their little child.
Tyler.
And he's got to be 10 or 11 now. And
I think about Tyler so much.
Who has custody? Who's watching?
From what I understand, his maternal grandmother mm-hmm. has custody of him, but he does not see any of Billy's family, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. I know that Beverly has not seen him since he was a baby. I don't know what all that situation is, but you know, how do you not think about that child? And thank God he was 6 months old and not 4 years old, and remember what happened.
Sure.
And then of course there is another child of Bill's, Justin, you know, and he's in his teens and he's got to grow up without his dad, you know, and they're the victims in all of this. They are the victims, you know, and I know that, you know, we have the other victims outside of this, you know, the parents and whatnot, but those children will suffer more than anybody else. And I think about them all the time. I don't think that'll ever stop either, you know, and it's a hard decision if you want to try to reach out to them, just like I reached out to Tracy. Do I ever reach out? I don't know that I could.
Yeah.
What do you say?
It's such a tragedy all the way around. I mean, just every facet of this story is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, as I sit here and I talk to you and I listen to you, you're just a remarkable, the strength that you convey out. You're a remarkable person, not only these years later, but to go through all that. And it seems like you are doing just the absolute best you can. And I think that's just a testament to, your personal inner strength and how you conduct your life.
Well, you can't love the person you are and hate the story that made you, no matter what happened. And I'm pretty proud of who I am these days. I live a quiet, clean life. If anything, if court taught me anything, if you've got skeletons in your closet, they're going to come out. Thank God I didn't have any. But, I live a quiet, clean life. We have a happy life. And, all of that, as tragic as it is, it's made me who I am today. And I'll come out and tell you, I'm a no bullshit person. I don't deal with liars. I don't play games. What you see is what you get with me. And if you don't want to be my friend, have a nice day. But yeah, you can't love who you are without, and hate the person, what made you to be that person. And I hate the story of what happened, but if it hadn't happened, would I be who I am today? I don't know.
That's a great takeaway for me and my listeners for this story, to take away that no matter how horrible the human condition is, that there is redemption, there is life after all this. And like I said, your strength and just your truthfulness and everything about you, I'm just very impressed. And having you on the program today, just my best to you. Thank you for all your time and everything.
Thank you.
And now joining me on the Necronomicast hotline, Tracy Greenwell, the younger sister of Bill Payne, and she's going to help us figure out what's going on with this mystery. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm good. You?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Now, you're there in Mountain City, right?
Yes.
What's it like? I'm in Omaha, but what's it like growing up in Mountain City, Tennessee?
Well, it's just a quiet community, and the schools are, well, when we went to school they were smaller, but we've never lived anywhere else, so we don't know any different than the small area.
Sure. How big of a town is it?
I don't know the population.
Would you say under 1,000, more than 1,000? I mean, it's pretty small, right?
Yeah, there's probably more than 1,000.
Okay. And you lived there your whole life?
Yes.
Know everybody in town pretty much?
I know just about everybody.
Okay. So like growing up there in Mountain City, everybody kind of knows everybody. People know everybody's kind of business.
Yeah. The tomahawk, the news, anything, we know it before it even, hits any of that.
Sure. Just through the grapevine and everything. So Bill's your older brother.
Yes. He was older. He's 3 years older than me.
Now, what kind of a big brother was he, or is he?
Billy, he was awesome. He would make sure I went to school. He took me to school, never fussed about, anything like that. And whatever he did, we done it together.
Was it just you two?
Yes. I do have a half brother, and he is 23 now, but my son's 22, so they're about the same age.
Sure. So like growing up, would you say a good relationship you guys had? Was he kind of a protector for you?
Yes.
Looked out for you?
Yeah, our mother lived in Johnson City, and then she'd moved to Knoxville, so we would go on our little trips, to spend the weekend with her, and we lived with our dad.
There in Tennessee?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how did Bill and Billie Jean, how'd they meet? How'd they hook
They
up?
both worked at the Parkdale Mills plant, cotton factory in Mountain City. They started seeing each other, talking to each other there. She was a lot younger than Billy.
And is that like the main business in town, the cotton mill?
That's the biggest, money-making plant.
So they both worked there, struck up a relationship, a friendship. And tell me, like, what's Billie Jean like when we look back?
She's very quiet. She gets along she got along with everybody. I don't think I've ever seen her mad. She was a sweetheart.
But you said she was kind of quiet?
Yeah. Yeah. She got to know you, I guess. And then she'd get a little rowdy, but she was good.
Sure. But you're like your brother. outgoing kind of guy.
Yeah.
So when they got together, what was it like for them kind of getting together?
Well, they didn't tell anybody for a long time. Well, for a little while, they just kind of kept it on the back burner. And then whenever she actually moved in with them, when they had started dating and they told everybody, then she decided, to move in with Billy.
So Bill and Billie Jean, they're an item now. And
yeah,
what's Bill? Does he change a little bit? Does she have kind of a maybe a influence on her?
Pretty frisky. I mean, anybody, if they wanted to go somewhere, he was always on it. He was ready to go. You couldn't tie him down. He worked, 12-hour shifts, and then it didn't matter. He would go. I said, I'd never seen anybody that wanted to go like he did.
So he worked hard and played hard.
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome.
But he loved to sing. He loved he'd karaoke, just anything anybody wanted to do, he'd do it. We'd go to Backbone Rock and rappel off the Backbone Rock. That was one of our every weekend things.
To go rappelling down the rock?
Yeah, I had to go to Backbone Rock. And
pretty adventurous.
Yeah.
So he's in this relationship now with Billie Jean, and does he change at all? How is he different around her?
Well, he just sort of calmed down. He stayed at home more, and the partying, was faded away. He just even after Tyler, their son, was born, he was just totally different. He was making sure, they were fine.
Yeah. So he's in a relationship, has a son. You said his name's Tyler, right?
Yeah.
And he just decides, well, I'm going to continue to work hard, but now focus a little bit more instead of the extracurricular activities there in Mountain City. He got into yard selling and auction. He liked to do stuff like that. Uh-huh. And so you described him as a great guy, great brother. How was he as a father? What kind of father is Bill?
He was a good father. He loved his kids. He has an older son.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, when him and his wife got divorced, she moved to Florida. So being better schools and stuff, he agreed to let him go. And but he would go to Florida and see him, as much as he could.
So just a great guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the plant or the mill, Jamie Curd, does he work there as well? He works there at the mill?
Yes. And actually, they were side by side for a long time.
Are they about the same age?
Jamie was a little bit older than us.
Okay.
I'm not sure by how much, but he was a little bit older.
But just, were they casual acquaintances, or were they drinking buddies, or did they know each other kind of well?
All the above. Jamie, he is, let's see, our grandmother and his dad were brother and sister. So he was our second cousin.
I gotcha. So that's the relationship with you. Did you know Jamie at all very well?
Yes. I mean, Christmas dinners we would have at our grandma's. We'd always all be there.
Wow. So you guys just, I'm just putting this together. I'm piecing this together. I'm just trying to, formulate how you guys all knew each other.
Even Billy would take him to work when he couldn't get out of his driveway or whatever, he would pick him up, because when we left our house, it wasn't just 2 or 3 minutes before he got to Jamie's, and he would stop and pick him up.
You guys, I mean, this isn't just casual.
It's a lot. Every week there was always.
Every week.
Yeah.
Christmas dinners. I mean, just,
everything. Yeah. All the above.
So this is not random. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody's known each other for a long time, it sounds like.
Yeah. Like when I went to pick up Billy's belongings at the plant, I looked down at the lotion bottle and it had curd/paint on it. And I was like, they shared lotion.
Wow.
That's how close.
Yeah. Amazing that, I'm just putting together these events and everything that's happened.
Yeah.
So Janelle, obviously you know Janelle pretty well.
Yes. We thought we did.
Oh yeah, you thought you did.
We thought we knew her.
When you and Janelle first met, what was that like? How did you guys meet?
I worked at the pharmacy, and she would come in with her parents to get their medicine. I don't know. She was just like how sick she was, started out how telling us, we felt bad for her. She was so sick, but her parents wouldn't let her do nothing. So that's how that kind of started, talking when they'd come in like that. So then we started talking on the phone and progress, from that.
Yeah. You worked at the pharmacy. She comes in often because she's not the most healthy person in the world, and she needs to come in there with her parents all the time with her too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because they drove her and
never come in by herself. Never.
She's dependent on her folks. She's obviously got health problems, and so you kind of befriend her and you guys exchange phone numbers.
Yeah. And just like, any other friends would do, we just went from there.
Sure.
And then she would ask her mom or dad, can I go here or there with them? And they would, no way, So then she said, well, maybe if they would let you come over here. And I thought, well, we'll try that, So we started, I went over there a time or two, not a whole lot, And everything's normal, just that they didn't want her to do nothing, and her being at her age, it's kind of, but I never thought nothing about it. I respected them for that. I didn't, that's where it comes in. You can't trust nobody.
It seems like they're protecting their daughter, just trying to shield her from any, she's not a healthy person, and, she has difficulty growing up with some disability. And so it just seems like mom and dad are just protecting her, or
seems kind of normal at first. Yeah.
Sure. Now, some trouble, was brewing between Bill and Billie Jean and Janelle. How did that start, or what's going on there?
It seems like after you start being friends with her, she would be like starting on somebody, It's like just talking about somebody all the time. You couldn't just go have a conversation like we're having now. It would be like, well, this person said this, or this person did that, or this person, and then you get thinking, well, just don't pay no attention. That's what I'll try to explain to her, But then, I don't know, it's like she wanted a boyfriend. But I never dreamed she was wanting, Billy the whole time. It just started me off. So I was talking to Bill, and I was like, well, she needs a boyfriend. We got to get her away from her parents, She's got to get out of this house.
Right. Let's help her out.
Yeah, that's what we started. And then he said, well, what about Jamie? Because, he didn't have a girlfriend and she didn't have a boyfriend. So we started trying to let them talk. Well, that was a definitely no, So I was kind of like the mean person then, because I was trying to get her out, away from them, and they didn't like that at all. So I was like, I don't know what you'd call I was, but I was just trying to make her see, you got to get away from your parents a little bit, or you ain't never going to have nobody.
Right.
Just a normal teenage or whatever. But no, that didn't go over good at all, because they did not like Jamie.
You didn't like Jamie at first?
They didn't at all.
Oh.
He was not even nowhere near good enough for her.
Okay.
In their eyes.
In their eyes. But, well, do you think anybody would have been good enough for...
No.
No? Right.
No, not the way they liked. They didn't want her to have nobody but them.
Mm-hmm. So the trouble between Bill and Billie Jean and Janelle starts coming because of Janelle likes Bill.
See, I didn't know this. She never, ever told me that.
Oh, wow. Do you think she was hanging out with you or to get information or kind of get closer to Bill, or? No?
I don't know.
Wow.
Honestly, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
Not even one time said anything about liking him.
So you guys get together and she just kind of likes to gossip a little bit too, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could tell that she would be like, these girls are really mean to me. And I'm like, how? But then she said they sent her emails. It was some other girls that live here in town.
Mm-hmm.
It was just somebody all the time.
And she's inventing this in her head.
Yeah.
So probably most people in town were like you. They kind of feel a little sorry for her. They think, mom and dad are protecting her. But she's an adult. Maybe she needs to meet somebody and kind of, let's cut the apron strings a little bit.
Yeah.
Jamie starts getting involved with Janelle and her family. Now, you said mom and dad didn't really approve of Jamie at first because
they didn't approve, no. So what she had to do was secretly, after I told him about her and told her about him, then they started having to do secretly because they said no. So she acted like her computer was tore up, and he worked on computers. So they let him come work on the computer, but then he had to go.
That's fun. Like, did the computer break down a few times and like,
No, he just acted like it did. But they let him fix the computer, I guess.
So you're talking to Jamie at the same time, and Janelle. Did Jamie ever talk to you about, I'm going to go hang out with Janelle? I like hanging out with her. Did he have was he starting to fall for her a little bit, or did he like her company?
Yeah, he's like, well, if you can get her to your house, then I can come to your house. Just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's just,
he fell head over heels for her.
What do you think it was? Was he just a lonely guy? Did he have relationships before Janelle? Or
he never had girlfriends, it was.
So like maybe two lonely people kind of finding each other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Jamie's mom, she was one of a kind. She would be like, she would talk on the phone for hours at a time. She was a sweet little lady. And if Jamie was at our house and his mom called, son, he would drop what he was doing and fly to see what she wanted. He lived with his mom.
Mm-hmm.
So he took care of his mom. And that was my granny's sister-in-law.
Okay.
And it's like, he started seeing Janelle, and she liked Janelle. But see, her parents still don't know. So they can't see each other much unless they sneak around. He had got her a cell phone to talk to him. He had bought her a cell phone to hide so they could text or whatever, but no big time relationship, like going places and, maybe just a few hours here and there.
Sure.
Sneaking around.
And we're not talking about kids in high school. How old do you think? Right. How old is Jamie and Janelle? And
Janelle is, she has to be getting close to 40 now. Yeah.
So she's late.
I don't know how old she is for sure.
Sure. So we're talking, she's late 20s, early 30s when all this was
yes.
happening. And how old was Jamie about the time? About the same, or is he older?
He was older.
Mm-hmm.
See, Billy was 36 when this happened, so he's a little bit older than him. So he's probably 38, 39.
Yeah, so just was establishing that these aren't little kids.
Right.
They've got their challenges in life, and they've got their situations living with their folks and everything. But
Jamie, he was a pretty good guy. He he worked. He
mm-hmm.
always worked, and took care of his mom. He wasn't no wild, zombie or nothing.
Sure, I understand. It's
just a normal guy.
That's what's so strange about all this to a guy here in Omaha, listening to this story and reading about it and everything. It's just how this all just came about. Everybody knew everybody, and and people known each other for a while. These weren't it just didn't happen all of a sudden. People knew each other in this town and had relationships and friendships.
Went to school together
Went to school together. Sure. So let me ask you though, Tracy, how'd you find out like what happened that day? How did you find out what happened to your brother and to Billie Jean?
Oh, I was at work. I worked over here at Food Country in the deli, and my husband's sister is really good friends with the sheriff, and I just looked up and there she was, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she's like, she said, "They're dead." I said, "What are you talking about?" I didn't know what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "It's Bill and Billie Jean." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I was so floored, but she just came out and said it. And she said, they think, he's killed her and then killed himself. I said, you're going to have to wait a minute. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And the reason it happened like that was because Mike Reese, the sheriff, had asked her, he had called Mary Jo, that's my husband's sister, and told her to come and get me and take me to the ER. That they did not want me to go down to the house because they knowed if I found out, I'd go straight down there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it takes all day to do their, investigation and all that.
Sure.
So they didn't want me nowhere near there. So that's how that started.
So you were at work.
Yes.
And they came in and told you. And so.
Actually, it's just my sister-in-law that came to tell me,
What's going through your mind when you find out? I know they said they thought, and that's the first I heard, that they thought at first, or they mentioned something about like a murder-suicide. I mean, this has got to be so devastating.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to say because I'm still thinking, what are you talking about? It floored me.
Sure. When was the last time you talked to?
I talked to him every day.
So just the day before you just.
Yeah. And actually that morning, I would make sure he was up every morning to go to work. That's the only morning I did not talk to him. And that's because I overslept.
Uh-huh.
And my husband had said, Trace, call Bill and see if he was hunting these wind-up razors that the old man used to wear or use, you remember the things they twisted up and it opened up in the top, a shaver.
Oh, yeah.
Old timey thing.
Yeah.
He was dying for one of those. Well, my husband had went to his mom's and he found 3. So he wanted to make sure he showed Billy that he found him one. So he wanted me to call him and tell him. He's like, Trace, call him and tell him I found him one of them shavers. And I said, I ain't got time. So that's the only morning I had not talked to him in forever.
Little sister's calling big brother to,
make sure he's up.
Make sure he's up and ready to go. Oh, man.
Because it took him a lot longer to get ready for school and everything than it did me.
That's usually the opposite of how things
I know,
go.
it's so funny. I'd be in the truck waiting. He'd be in there fixing his hair.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Well, you poor thing. So all this is going through your mind. Then later, Buddy and Jamie are arrested. The shock of losing your brother. And then how this starts to unfold. What are you thinking when Buddy and Jamie are arrested?
We all had to go everybody had to go to the police station and they talked to us about who it could have been or what. And I said, I don't have a clue. I didn't have a clue who it could have been. And I thought maybe somebody had hit on somebody and it went to the wrong house. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked me if I thought the Potters. And I was like, well, no, I wouldn't think so. But I know that they had been arguing. I do know that. But I never dreamed it would just go to somebody killing somebody. And it was just.
Yeah, because this in this small town, this never happens.
But there was so much to it we didn't know about. There was so much more hatred that nobody knew that because it was makeup. It was fake.
Yeah.
It was. Nobody knew nothing. They just know that they wasn't talking no more. We just know Billy and Jamie wasn't talking because they were mad at each other for some ungodly reason. Somebody said something at work or somebody said something and I just know they wasn't talking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never dreamed it was like going into like this one was going to cut this one's head off or this one was going to, nobody knew that.
Sure. And then when the stories about the CIA and all, all these things come out, it just must have just blown your mind. And
it still does. I'm still like, what?
I know.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
And it turns your life totally 100% upside down on its head.
Yeah. And my dad, he was just a plain person. He never went nowhere. He just went straight to work. He had the same job for 40 years.
Yeah.
He was just plain, wore the same thing every day. Uniform shirt, did he go to work?
Yeah.
Nothing ever changed. And he was just beyond himself. It was really bad.
What's your relationship like or with Buddy and Barbara, with the Potters?
It was normal. He tried to be big and bad, He would go on about the army or whatever. whatever he was in, he would go on about stuff like that and talk about people killing like through that. He was just a dad, a protective dad. You thought he was always going on about something.
Yeah.
But he always acted like he was real sick, and he was just real dramatic.
A lot of drama in the whole family.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and every time I ever seen Barbara, she was always in the bed. Something's wrong with her all the time. She was always like laid in the bed. She would come to town with them every once in a while, but mostly it was Janelle and her dad.
Yeah. I know Janelle had her physical condition subbing, but it seems like a lot of how she learned to deal with the adversity in her life, she kind of learned from her mom and dad. Like I hear a lot of from you.
Yeah.
Everybody's sick, and there's a lot of
always
sharing their problems. And
I mean, she would actually take insulin shots and stuff and make her sugar go to make her sick, to make her be put in the hospital, or she would do it to herself.
Mm-hmm. I have a son who's diabetic, and I know firsthand what insulin and how you administer it, how you use it. I know exactly.
I mean, it would kill you. It could kill you.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Too much. And it's not something in any way to be, messed with or trifled with.
Yeah.
To get sympathy or.
And that's what she would use.
Yeah, that's dangerous behavior on her part.
And I know when she went to court several times for this same stuff, people had took her to court. I forget how many court documents there was, but she would actually if she thought she was losing the case, she would actually go out and pump herself full of insulin and come back in and pass out, so the rescue squad would have to come get her. She played it. She played everybody.
And that's, like I said earlier, that's very dangerous to do that to yourself. So you mentioned Barbara, and I know it came out like during when she was questioned. They had this interrogation of Barbara. Barbara says that Bill threatened her. Does that sound like anything at all? That
he threatened her, as in the way I took it is he said, you better do something with her because she's lying. She's starting this stuff, He said, I want my name took off everything and I want out of it. He said, don't you ever talk to me no more, and I won't ever, talk to you. He said, let's just drop it. Mm-hmm. That is his threat to them. Leave me alone.
Yeah, and that's not a threat. A threat is usually,
right,
I'm going to do something if you don't do that.
He never said he was going to hurt her.
Yeah, he just sounds...
He'd like to have, but he never.
Right. So that doesn't sound like to threaten her.
Yeah, he never said, like, I'm going to kill you or I'm going to beat you up or he said, you're going to take my name off of this, is what he was doing that way.
And so all this is going on. What's it like in Mountain City? What's the reaction in town? I mean, is everybody talking about it? Are you still able to go to work or?
It's still like it ain't even real because it's so fake and so like makeup. None of it happened. None of it was true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her dad said on that thing that we got to hear that Billy was going to rip her head off or something. That was never said. Janelle said that. Acting like somebody else. I don't know who she's acting like that day, but she makes these people up and then she responds to herself. I mean, she's that person. She's them, everybody.
Sure. Tracy, when you're in town and you're trying to get through your day when this is all happening, and are they gathering like at the local bar and talking about this? Is there a lot of gossip? And I know
you go, even still, if they see me or if they see, they'll be like over here whispering or something, and they'll be, that's the girl that, her brother got killed. And actually Barbara is getting out of prison, soon.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm still not up to date on the situation, but I don't like it. But what do you do? She has 2 life sentences. Where did they go? Is my question. She has a plea deal now. I'm shocked.
Sure. So the reaction in town to this happening is?
Yeah. Slap on the hand and go on.
All this is unfolding also online, and there's like a community page, a Facebook page, and it's called Concerned Citizens of Mountain City. It's a Facebook page of people that just kind of join a private group or a group of everybody.
Sort of like Topics used to be.
Yeah, sure. And Topics. Yeah, I remember Topics.
And that was a big thing with Janelle.
Yeah, that was a place I remember a lot of people getting on and
see, they didn't know who you was on there.
Well, and there's a lot of shit talking on there too, Tracy. So, but tell me about this Concerned Citizens of Mountain City Facebook page. They're really pushing for Janelle and Barbara to be arrested, to be held accountable for this.
Yes. And who knows who was there, to tell you the truth. We'll probably never know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not saying she was there. I'm not saying Barbara or Janelle was there. And I'm not saying Jamie and Buddy was there, because I wasn't there. I do not know who was there. But I guarantee you it would not have had happened if it hadn't been for Janelle and Barbara.
Oh, yeah.
So that's, in my book, it don't matter who was there, who did what. They were all in on it. They should all got the same thing.
I'm just struck by, your story of you guys are just living your life like everybody else in America.
Best time of our lives,
You're just living your life just like everybody else in America. And then all of a sudden what you thought was real turns out to be not real. And you're hearing all these fantastic stories, and you're hearing like, what? I just can't imagine what it's like. It's bad enough when you're living in a huge town, like maybe a New York or Los Angeles, and something happens. But when you know all the principal players, when you know all the people, and you've been in their house, and you were talking about Christmases together, and these guys at work sharing their lotion at the cotton mill, and just, it's amazing that so many secrets and so many wild, fantastic stories have come through this, and this is all being revealed to you in real time as you're living your life.
And whenever Billy noticed, something was going on, he had everything that happened, he printed it out off the computer.
Mm-hmm.
He had a 3-ring binder. It was probably, I'd say, about that thick, and it was full. And he picked that up. I went down to see him that evening, and he picked that book up. He said, "This is what she's doing now." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, I said, "I'm not reading that." I said, "Grow up." I said, "Both of you need to grow up." I said, "Get over this." And I never read that book. And I feel so guilty for not reading that book. But every time something was said, he printed it.
Mm-hmm.
So he had that.
After they make arrests, which must have sent shockwaves through your town. First of all, people are killed. Never happens here. People are locking their doors.
Yeah, we never locked our doors. Never.
Do you lock them now?
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't even go outside without locking it.
Yeah. So your whole sense of community is shattered by this, because you don't know what's going on, how shocking and horrible this is for everybody in the community.
And say, like, back to locking the door thing.
Yeah.
There was supposedly months of them around the house in different spots taking pictures of Billy Jean, my dad, just people coming and going. Anything happened, they were like in town taking pictures of them. I mean, it was just like really weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know all of that for a fact. I've never seen the pictures, but I do. Somebody did tell me that they had been, hiding out doing this for months to get a routine, I guess. I don't know. Find out what they're doing.
Just staking them out.
Yeah. Planning all this to go down. I don't know for sure how it went, but.
So after these arrests, what are you doing during this time after they're doing the investigation? What's life like for you after they're arrested?
I'm just sitting back listening and taking it all in and thinking, well, did he know that? Did that really happen? Is this true?
I was going to say, the investigators, they finished their investigation. They're working on putting this all to trial. How many trials were there?
3.
There was 3. Did you participate are you participating in the trials?
Yeah. They sent they summoned us.
Did you participate in all three?
Yes.
What was your testimony like? Because I mean, like you said, you weren't there. You're not an eyewitness, but you have important information about the relationship that's going on here.
They, at the court, at Potter's Buddies, we didn't have to, we didn't have to say anything. But like for Janelle and Barbara, I had to testify. Just like we had talked, we had emailed each other. She had discussed like Billy being mean to her and in an email or something. And my response to her was, just get over it. I don't know what you're talking about. That was my response to her. So I had to read that. And I just had to go through and tell them all that I knew. And it was nothing really. I just know that we tried to be her friend and they ended up dead. Played out.
What are the trials like? Not just for you, but like for the town, because this probably attracted a lot. This has attracted a lot of attention.
They like to never found a jury because everybody knowed about it. You can't know somebody. You can't know anything about it. It was hard. I know it's hard for them
for the prosecutors.
Yeah, because everybody knowed it.
Yeah, I guess jury selection would be pretty tough. I didn't even think of that. Like just asking everybody, well, because half the town probably works or most of the town works at the mill. Everybody probably knows.
They actually went to Jonesboro's where we finally ended up having them.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Is there anything like where you're sitting in the courtroom and you're listening to what's going on and you're listening to lies and you're listening to manipulation and you're listening to these
They kept me out of there as much as possible.
They kept you out of there?
Yeah. I don't really know if it was because they didn't want me to have to hear how bad it really was. Mm-hmm. And they had me testifying, so I don't get to stay in there till I'm done. So, of course, I'm toward the end, sure. But I think they done that to keep me from knowing so much bad stuff.
Yeah. To protect you about that sensitive information. Yeah. So you're sitting there in the courtroom, though, and Janelle is there on trial, and her mom's on trial, and her dad's on trial, and Jamie's on trial. And these are people that you know. What's it like sitting in the courtroom?
I think the hardest were with Jamie because we were all so close. Janelle was just a phase. She just appeared. She didn't mean as much to us as Jamie did. And she was a friend, but she wasn't a real friend. Jamie was.
Yeah, Jamie's seems like he's practically family.
Yeah, he was family. He was our friend. I think that's what made it the worst. Because he could have stopped it. He could have, been like, hey, Bill, I know you're mad at me, but this is what's going on, But no, he couldn't have been that blindsided. I mean, my God, I don't think I could ever forgive him for this, but, it's just hard.
Yeah. Tracy, what do you miss most about Bill?
I miss everything about him. Mm-hmm. He was a lot of fun.
Are your folks still alive?
My dad passed away. It was right at a year after Billy got killed. He got, he got sick. He had a urinary tract infection and it went into his bloodstream. It set up E. coli. And he had this urinary tract infection the same time we was planning the funerals. Mm-hmm. And we just sort of brushed it off, and he went on, but then he got real sick. Then, like when he died, they put on his death thing, failure to thrive, because he was sick. He was getting better, but he just didn't want to, I guess. He was so tore up inside anyway, he couldn't just come back from it. And it's just like he was crushed.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to deal with it. He never talked about nothing, so.
What do you miss most about Billy?
I miss everything about both of them. They were just, I don't know. It was just, I don't want to tell you. It's just.
Yeah. And forgive me.
I don't know, this just threw me off.
Yeah.
He's just, he was one of a kind, though. I mean, you just have to, I feel like he liked to go all the time. He'd go to Las Vegas. He'd go anywhere anybody was ready to go. And I said, it feels like he's just gone right now, and he'll be back in a few days on his vacation trip or something.
When you think back about their lives and what they left behind, what would you like Bill and Billie Jean to be remembered as or by? How would you like them to be remembered?
I mean, they were just, it's like fate brought them together because, he was getting older. It's time to chill out. And it took somebody like Billie Jean, that good of a person, to come into his life to make him want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he just fell in love with her, and then he was done with it all.
Yeah, from everything that I've read and heard and what you've said, it just seemed like he just met her and she didn't make him or force him to change or do anything like that.
And she wasn't like bossy. She didn't try to make him, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. If he want to do something, it's fine. She was just different.
Yeah. Well, he found somebody that he could settle down with.
Yeah.
Do you see Tyler much?
No, he's really sick. He has, what is it? I went blank. Autism.
Mm-hmm.
He has autism, and it's real bad, but he was having seizures like up to, I think they said was having like up to 7 a day. But they couldn't tell us that it was from that, but that didn't help it.
Sure.
But we was noticing some changes in him. He was 6 months old, but just little things that he was doing was leading towards something of having autism. But, when them being that little, couldn't tell for sure. But he was diagnosed with it, and it's...
Do you get to see Tyler much?
No.
No. Where's
He lives with her mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you had to think of, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you were thinking about Bill and Billie Jean and their legacy, kind of like what you want people to remember them by, or if you wanted some people that are just learning about this because of a case, and there's so much more, their lives were just much, much more than a case, more than an investigation, more than a crime scene. What would you like people to know that their legacy is when people think of them?
A lot of people thought, they were a perfect couple too. But their age difference, she was like 22 and he was 36. It don't matter, how old you are, how young you are. If you love that person, then you love them.
Mm-hmm.
And there ain't nothing anybody can change about that. And I know that they hadn't got married, and now they won't ever get the chance to be, but they were going to get married, and, she never got the chance to, go out and buy a wedding dress, and they took that from her.
Yeah. So many of these shows and people that look at this case and this story, all these people, they focus a lot on the Potters.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to have this opportunity to ask you, like what you want people or what you wish people knew about Bill and Billie Jean.
They were good people. They didn't have to make nothing up. They didn't have to lie about nothing. They were just living a normal life to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd hate to know that I'd have to go around sending emails about people and making people up to try to be happy. They didn't have to do that.
And I know this is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking for you. And one thing that I wanted to do when talking to you was make sure that we talk about your brother. Just, do you have a favorite story, a memory of your brother, just something that you turn to or that floods your memories, that just makes you remember your brother in just the most positive light? Like what's like your favorite, or just a warm memory, just a memory of your brother?
Me and Billy would, this is crazy. Every time we left each other's sight, most people say, "Oh, I love you," whatever.
Right.
Good night. We'd stick our tongue out and say, "Got you laced." And that was our main thing. I mean, from little on up, we done that all the time. Because he thinks he had to be the winner on everything. And if anything happened, say like, for example, we went to our mom's in Knoxville. Well, he's speeding, so he gets pulled over, but it's my fault. So that's one of the things that I would get mad at him over. I'll be like, why is it my fault? Because you're speeding. But it was all my fault then because he got pulled over for speeding.
Right.
It was always something I'd done.
Sounds like a typical business that an older brother gives a younger sister.
Yeah, this is like, my nanny said she used to have to sit between us because we'd be picking at each other the whole time and slapping over her, or, just something all the time. Dad would take us up our grandma and grandpa's in the mornings to go to school. Our grandpa took us to school. And Billy said, "I'll give you $5 if you jump in that mud hole." Right before we was getting ready to go to school. So what I do, jumped right in that mud hole. I had to wear his clothes to school that day. And he was so excited. He thought that was the best thing in the world. Just silly stuff. Anything he told me to do, I'd do it.
Jumping, did you get the $5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I took the rest of his money too. No, it was just, it was something all the time.
Sure. Well, Tracy, I know this is hard, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, you're welcome.
To speak to me.
I mean, I love to talk about him.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, it's important to to share the stories. When you have these stories, to think of the real people and the implications and the ramifications and also the legacy that these crimes leave behind. There's horrible evil out there, but if people can listen to you, there's also these heartfelt stories of your brother and the love that he shared with you, your family, with Billie Jean. That's equally as important to focus on. Just the
Yeah, it's just nothing that was ever the same after that, and it'll never be the same now. It's just like my mom had told him. She said, our Christmas is nothing. She said she described it like, that we, instead of sitting around the table telling jokes, we go to the graveyard,
right.
Put flowers on a grave,
right.
Instead of getting to listen to Billy tell his jokes and whatever.
Well, Tracy, I can't thank you enough for spending the time, talking to me and sharing stories with me about your family and your brother and that horrible event for you guys. I hope people that listen to this get a better understanding of who your brother and who Billie Jean were and what great people they were and what they meant to you. That's my intent, is that their stories get shared and people realize, when you're listening to a true crime show, that people focus on the victims and the lives that they led and the people that they left behind. So,
like after they had, passed away, and I was looking back through like where people leave their comments at the funeral home and all that. We got phone calls from people everywhere. I mean, we got phone calls from people in Gatlinburg that had met them when they went to Gatlinburg. He was in the coins, pawn shops, yard sales. You wouldn't believe the people that knew them just for that short period of time. Just, getting out talking. That's how he was. Mm-hmm. He didn't know a stranger, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing, your experiences and everything. I love talking to people, and and listening to people's stories and interacting with them. And for you to take this time and to share all this with me and my listeners, I'm very appreciative to you, and I wish nothing but the best for you. Honest to God.
Thank you.
Honest to God. There we are, everybody. Episode 220 of the Necronomicast, The Facebook Murders, featuring my special guests, Christy Duncan and Tracy Greenwell. Important stories, personal stories. I know it was a little bit long of an episode, but I really didn't want to cut any of that out. Next up on the Necronomicast, episode 221 will feature the brilliant Sapphire Sandalo from Paranormal Caught on Camera, Ghost Town Terror, Stories with Sapphire, an important voice that's emerging in paranormal studies and research. Had a great conversation with her a couple weeks ago, actually a couple days ago. And that episode will be out on April 1st. Every place that you go to enjoy your podcast entertainment. Speaking of podcast entertainment, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. Tons of good ones out there, and I'm amazed at how many people listen to this show, email the show, like the show, follow my show. I really appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for everything. Hope you're enjoying your life. Take care. We'll see you around. Copyright 2022. All rights reserved. The Necronomicast. Recorded in beautiful Omaha, Nebraska.